I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC, and today we've got our Can-Am Commander in the shop. We're going to show you how to install a Tusk UTV Stage 3 Upgrade Kit on it. Now this is a straightforward process, and the Stage 3 kit is one of the easiest ways to get some of the most popular accessories installed on your brand new machine. These items are going to give you added protection and comfort. So what comes in the kit is your full glass windshield. You have pivot folding mirrors with A-pillar mounts, the Force aluminum roof, a Polycarb rear window, a cargo rack, and a 30-inch curved LED light bar. So again, this stuff is straightforward to install, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start out with the roof. So the first thing we need to do is install 2 roll cage clamps to the back of the roll cage. We're going to measure out 4.5 inches from this weld, and to remove the hardware from this clamp, you're going to need a 5mm Allen. So we're 4.5 inches right there, and then something you want to note is this flat section, that mount, you're going to want that to face in towards the cab. We've left the hardware loose so we can move it once the roof is in place, and we did not use the rubber strip. Then we'll do the same thing on the other side. The next step is to install your foam tape. So before we lay this down, you want to wipe your roll cage off with a rag, make sure it's clean. And then you're going to cut this into 3 sections. So this back section, or the back bar, you don't need it on top of there, but what this foam tape does is dampen vibration. So you want it on the 2 sides and the front. Now before we set the roof in place, we do want to run some wires for our light bar. So what we're going to do, we have this plastic cover here we need to pull off, and we're using a T25 to remove both of the screws holding it in place. So at the bottom of the A-pillar, we have a hole going up through the roll cage. We need to gain access to that. So what we're going to do is remove the mounting bolts for this lower post. We're going to use some welding wire to help fish these wires through the roll cage. So there's a hole up top, and again, we're coming out through the bottom. Now from the main harness, the section that runs up to the light bar with the gray connector, we're going to disconnect that from the harness. You just have these bullet connectors here, and we're going to attach this end to the wires at the roll cage, and we're going to stagger these, just use some electrical tape and then pull them through. So in that plastic cover we removed, we've got a cutout right here, and we're going to run our wires through that. And then once they're ran through there, there's only one pathway next to this channel, and we're just going to go straight through that down into the wheel well area. Now we can place the roof on top of the roll cage. Next we'll install the back bolts. So these are your M8 by 30mm button head bolts. We've got the washer on, we're coming in through the top. We've got our spacer, and that's just going to thread into the clamp. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Next, we need to install the A-pillar mounts. So to do that, we need to remove this plastic cover. We're going to use a T25 Torx bit for that. And then we're using a 15mm socket and wrench to remove the A-pillar bolts. And you're not going to reuse this bolt, but you will reuse this nut. Next we have our mirror mount and the 2 bolts that came in the kit. We've got our spacer. We'll slide that on there. We're going to go through both of the mounting locations, and then we're going to reuse that nylock nut that we took off. And we'll go ahead and tighten them down. Then we'll do those same steps on the other side. And after that, we can reinstall our plastic covers. The next step is to install your mirrors. So you need to have the logo in the correct orientation. So this is our passenger mirror. I'm going to set that aside for a second. We actually have these spacers we're going to use. So I'm going to remove that. We've got just the bolt. That's going to go through the mount. Then you're going to install the star washer, the spacer, and then we're going to remove the bolt from the end of this mirror. You can use a 13mm wrench to loosen that up if it's tight. Then we're going to install the second star washer, and we're going to thread the bolt into the mirror. We'll adjust everything where we want it and tighten it down. After that, we can do the same thing on the other side. Now to get the windshield installed, we need to install the 4 mounting brackets. So we've got upper and lower mounting holes in the A-pillar, and we've got the T-nut plate, T-nut cap, and I've threaded 2 of the bolts. These are the 25mm button head bolts. We just threaded those in a couple of turns. So what we're going to do, we're going to snake this whole thing up inside that hole in the A-pillar, and then we'll pull it down. And the only thing sticking out will be this raised section if you install that correctly. So we'll set that in place, and from here you can actually hold on to one of these bolts and then tighten the center bolt. And then I'm going to remove that lower bolt. We have our brackets. So we're going to install this with a bolt on each side of the bracket. Again, the 25mm bolts. And then I'm not going to tighten these all the way. I'm going to leave them loose enough so we can adjust our bracket. Then we've got our standoff spacer and our 16mm button head bolt. I'm going to thread those together and tighten this down all the way. We're using a 5mm Allen and 15mm open end wrench. And then we can do those same steps in the remaining 3 locations. Now before you install your windshield, you want to make sure that both pieces of bulb seal are installed in the same orientation shown in the instructions. The shorter piece is going to go across the bottom and the longer piece is going to go all the way around the outside. The next step is to set the windshield in place, and we're going to line up the standoff brackets with the holes in the windshield, and we're going to use the M8 by 16mm button head bolts with the washers, and we'll loosely install those, center the windshield side to side, up and down, and then we're going to tighten all of the hardware down. Now when you tighten everything down, make sure you tighten the outside bolts first, and we're going to come inside and tighten down the brackets. To prep the rear window, again, we've removed the protective coating from both sides. We've got it on the blanket, and all we have to do is attach these 3 pieces of flap seal. So the longer piece is going to go in the middle, 2 shorter pieces on the side, and again, if you need a tighter fit, you can simply pinch this together. And we're just going, longer piece in the middle, shorter piece on the 2 sides. The next step is to install the rear window. The flap seal is going to be facing up, and to get this into place, what you're going to have to do is flex the window in the middle while you set the sides. Then we can take the 2 M8 by 45 millimeter button head bolts, install the supplied washer, and you're going to go through the 2 slots in the rear window, and there's 2 holes on the roll cage. We're going to go through both of those holes right now. And as you slide the window up, the tabs in the middle need to go to the inside of the roll cage. The next step is to install the P-clamp. Now this flat side, that's going to be inside of the cab. We're going to wrap it around the bar, and we're actually going to sandwich the windshield with this clamp. After that, we're going to take our M6 bolt. We're going to go through the clamp, through the rear window, and back through the clamp again, and then we've got the flange nut on the back side. Then we'll do the same thing on the other side, make any final adjustments to the rear window and tighten it down. And as you tighten all the hardware down, be careful that you don't over tighten it or it's going to crack your Polycarb rear window. The next step is to drill the holes for the 3 mounting locations in the bottom. That's where we're going to install those push rivets. So we've got our 21/64 inch drill bit that came in the kit, and we're just barely going to poke through the plastic with it. Be careful that you don't damage the seat or go too far in and damage anything behind there. Then we'll take our push rivet, we'll install it all the way through and lock it down. And we'll do the same thing in the other 2 mounting locations. Now we need to prep the cargo rack. So right here we have the center leg, our right leg, and the left leg. And what you need to do to prep this, you've got your eyelet. I've applied a couple drops of supplied Loctite on here. And then what you need to do is take your washer. We're going to slip that on. We'll stick it into that mounting location for the leg. You've got a plastic spacer underneath that. And the flat side of the spacer, that's going to be facing up. And then we've got this threaded insert. So the stepped side of the insert will be facing up. The flat side is going to face down. And we're just going to thread that on a few turns. And you want to do that same thing in all 6 mounting locations, and then we're going to bring these over to the machine. Now back over at the machine, we're going to install the left and right hand legs into the cargo bed. So the slant on the legs, that's going to face towards the front of the machine, and then this bend at the bottom, the eyelets will be facing the outside of the machine. So these nut plates, you're just going to slide them into the slots that are already in the bed, and then once you start tightening these down, the nut plates are going to rotate, and that's what's going to lock this into place. Then we'll do the same thing in the front, and we're going to have this bend facing the front of the machine. Now we can set the cargo rack into place, and we're going to install the 8 M8 by 20 millimeter button head bolts. We've got some Loctite on the threads, and once you have those loosely installed, adjust this for optimal fit, and we're going to tighten those down. The last step is to tighten the eye bolts by hand, and once you have those snug down, you're going to take a wrench or screwdriver and you're going to tighten them an additional half turn. For the light bar, there's a few things I want to explain on the bench, just because once we're on the machine, it's going to be kind of hard to see where we're wiring everything up. But some of the main things you need to know are, number one, the black and red wire. These are going to go to a constant power, whether it's straight to your battery or a bus bar. Now, the next thing you need to know, the gray connector, this just hooks up to the light bar itself. There's this little extra piece of wire. We're not even going to use that. And then the next thing you want to know is with the switch. So we have this white connector. I'm going to disconnect that, and we have a little section of wire we're going to plug in here. So with this section of wire, what we're going to be doing is the side with only 2 wires, we're going to connect that into the main harness. And then the side with 3 wires, that's going to go to our rocker switch. And then this white wire, we're going to hook this up to key on power. And then the last thing I want to show you is with the rocker switch, we're going to be using an upgraded switch. And to use that, we're just going to have to trim this little protective cover right here. And we can remove the switch. At this point, we're ready to finish up with the light bar. So we're going to the front of the roof. We're going to install our mounts and the front roof mounts as well. So the first thing you need to do is grab your clamp. You're going to remove this bolt from the flat section. And you've got 2 bolts on the back side. We'll take those out. Then we need to take the J-hook. We're going to set that on top of the flat section. And this hook itself, it's going to go in between where it clamps onto the roll cage itself, and the flat portion, that's going to be facing the front of the machine. So these 2 holes in the top of the roof, we're just going to go underneath the roof and set this around our roll cage bar. So with that clamp in place, we have that foam tape that's sitting on top. So I'm just going to cut that out on each side with a razor blade. So I'll go ahead and set that in place, and we'll install the bottom of that roll cage clamp. We'll leave this just loose enough so we can make adjustments. Now for the mounting bracket, the Tusk logo is going to face forward and to the outside. We're going to start with the rear mounting location. That's going to be our M6 by 16 millimeter button head bolt. And we're going to leave this hardware loose enough we can make adjustments. And this front one, that's going to be your M8 by 16 millimeter button head bolt. Now for the roof mounts, again, it's going to be an M8 by 16 millimeter button head bolt. We've got a washer on there. We're going to go through the roof. There's a little gusset with a cutout in it in the corner of the roll cage. And then we've got our flange nut on the bottom side. Now we need to set the light bar in place. You'll notice you have two mounting options on your brackets, an upper and a lower. The upper is if you have a vented roof, which we don't have, so we're using the lower mounting hole. And since we have the curved light bar, we're using the 25mm bolt and the 13mm spacer. And when you set this in place, it helps if you have a friend. The spacer is just going to go in between the bracket and your light bar. After you have the light bar tightened in place, you're going to want to check the final position of the light bar and then go back through and make sure you have all the hardware for the bracket tightened. The next step is to route our wiring. So first thing we're going to do, this wire coming from the light bar, we need to route it, and we're going to remove this little section of wire from it. And all we need to do is connect it here, but for a cleaner install, what you can do before you tighten down the bottom side of your roll cage clamp, you can remove the upper left mounting bolt in your roof, and then you're going to route this underneath the roof. Now if you do run your wire like this, make sure you avoid any pinch points. After that, we can make our connection and just make sure it's clipped in all the way. Now we're at the front wheel well on the driver's side, and we need to route these power wires coming from the light bar through the firewall. So we have this little protrusion right here. We're going to route the wires around the front side of that. There's going to be a rubber grommet where a bunch of wires are coming out, but we're just going to route these wires through the grommet into the cab. Now before we make any electrical connections, we want to disconnect the negative terminal on our battery. So we're just going to remove our seat on the driver's side and disconnect it. Now we're going to connect the wires coming from the light bar to the main harness. Then we have the white wire for our key on power to the switch, and I've sourced an electrical eyelet for that. We're just going to crimp it on. Now underneath the dash, you'll notice you've got a bus bar here, or power distribution. So this middle terminal, this is going to be your constant power from the battery. The one on the driver's or the passenger side, that's your ground. And then the one all the way on the driver's side, that's the key on power. So with the main harness, we're taking this red wire and going to that constant battery power and taking the black wire to ground. And when you tighten the nut, you just want to barely snug it down because those terminals can be broken if you over tighten them. Now for the rocker switch, we need to remove this dummy plug. And to take that out, you just press on it from the back side. Now with these wires, if you didn't want to source an eyelet for the key on power, you can use this switch and you can drill a hole in your dash to mount this up and it's going to work fine, but you're not going to be taking advantage of the relay that is wired into this harness. So the whole point of the relay is you can't accidentally leave the switch on and run your battery dead. When your key's off, then the light bar is going to turn off as well. Now to connect these to your rocker switch, you've got two options. Your first option is to run the white wire to the number 2 terminal. the blue wire to the number 3 terminal on the bottom, and then the black wire on top. And that's going to be the number 8 terminal. But for us, we want to take advantage of all the features of this rocker switch. So it has a background light as well as a light that indicates the light bar is on. So to do that, what we need to do is splice a wire into our black, and we're going to run it to the number 7 terminal. That's our ground wire. And we're also going to splice into the white wire and run it to the number 6 terminal. And that way we can take advantage of those background lights on the switch. Now for the additional wires, I'm just going to use the wires that came with the light bar kit. This is the power extension wires. And then we're just going to trim these wires so we have a few inches to work with, and it can help to stagger them for when we use the wire taps into the existing wires. So we'll strip the wires and then install some connectors. You can use a crimp-on style as well, or whatever you prefer. And you want to press your wire up into the tap, make sure it's all the way bottomed out. We're going to clamp down on it with our pliers. Then fold the cap over. And we'll do the same thing on the power wire. Now to wire up the switch, these black wires are going to go to the 7 and 8 terminals. The white wire goes to your number 2 terminal. The spliced wire going into the white wire, that's going to be your number 6 terminal. And the blue wire is going to go on bottom. That's your number 3 terminal. Now with the switch, I'm going to set that about where it goes, but I'm not going to push it in yet. What we need to do now is connect our negative battery cable, and then we're going to test it out and make sure it works. So the lower light lit up, our light comes on, and the light bar on our switch, that also lights up, so we know we're good. From here, we're going to tie up all the wiring harness using some zip ties. And as you do that, you want to make sure you avoid any pinch points and rotating parts. That's all there is to installing the Tusk UTV Stage 3 Upgrade Kit on your Can-Am Commander. If you have any questions about the install process, leave those down in the comments below. And if you need to pick one of these up, they're available on our website and they qualify for free shipping. Now, if you like this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Thanks for watching.